The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Sam, and I want to make self-growth normal. Self-growth Sam. If you want to make self-growth normal, because people shouldn't have to look this information up, it should just be mainstream knowledge, please make sure to smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm so it can help spread these ideas and get them across everywhere. This book is different. It's definitely different. It's interesting. It was written by a co-writer of something that was put together by the Netflix CEO, Reed Hastings, No Rules about corporate culture. But this is a book about how cultures interact with each other throughout the world and the differences between them. And it's really strange and beautiful, in a sense, how she approached it. To begin, the author is quick to bring up a few examples of who she's worked with over the years, and then that learning about how people think, lead, and work across different cultures isn't exactly stereotyping. You shouldn't make assumptions about people's behaviors and thought habits based on where they come from, but this does not mean that learning about cultural contexts is unnecessary. I don't know if I mentioned this later in the review, but if you look at other reviews, at least on Audible, they praised the book. I don't think there were any negative ones, and they were all like, oh my gosh, I've worked with people all across the world. I work for an international company, and this is completely true. If you work with people from all around the world, it's almost as if you still have to have an appreciation for cultural differences, if that makes sense. This might sound like a fire hose of information, but there are 8 different scales of cultural differences. Communicating, low versus high context, direct negative feedback versus indirect negative feedback, principles first versus applications first, leading, egalitarian versus hierarchical, deciding, consensual versus top-down, trusting, task-based versus relationship-based, disagree, confrontational versus confrontation, scheduling, linear time versus flexible time. It's stuff that probably is not as complex, but much more useful actually than it sounds. In this review, I'm going to go over my thoughts on the book, things that surprised me, things I learned, a little bit of a summary on each chapter. I'm also going to go over some standout quotes, who I recommend this book to, and what books to maybe check out next. It sounds like a lot, but we always somehow get through it. I still am dumbfounded to this day after doing 2 years of these book reviews. How? But it works. The first chapter is called Navigating Cultural Differences and the Wisdom of Mr. Chen. Culture is something that, if you talk about culture, it's kind of like you're talking to someone about their mom. If you have a problem with their culture, they might have a problem with you. And the author did acknowledge, I think she acknowledges this quite a bit, but her biggest acknowledgement was in the beginning of the book that culture is not easy to talk about. And that it's almost like throughout the book, she's walking through a minefield. However, she does promise that all the situations that she recounts are drawn from the stories of real people working at real companies, but she has changed the names, details, and circumstances, of course, to maintain anonymity. The next chapter is called Listening to the Air, Communicating Across Cultures. She said that the skills involved in being an effective communicator vary dramatically from one culture to another. Good communication is all about clarity and explicitness. Allegedly, some cultures are much more explicit than others. Others are implicit. They just imply things and they're like, oh, I thought you knew what I meant. Have you experienced this before? I thought you knew what I meant. Why do I have to repeat myself 3 times? Listening to the audiobook, I found myself wondering why different cultures are the way that they are. I feel like if the author actually went into that, the book would probably be 3 times longer. Because there's so much that goes into it, but it's not entirely overwhelming. Maybe it's not overwhelming because she didn't go that deep into those things. She uses terms like low and high context to describe the way cultures generally communicate of Anglo-Saxon and non-Anglo-Saxon countries. By the way, for anyone curious, Anglo-Saxon means relating to or denoting the habits of the Germanic inhabitants of English from their arrival of the 5th century up to the Northern Conquest. But high and low context is a reason why one person from an Anglo-Saxon country wants to clarify something to make sure that they understand it, and someone from a non-Anglo-Saxon country is like, does this person not understand me? Why don't they care what I have to say? Did they not pick up what I was putting down? The next chapter is called The Many Faces of Polite, Evaluating Performance and Providing Negative Feedback. Something else I wonder is what credibility the book would have brought to the table if it based its lessons on studies and research, despite how much personal experience the author has had with the topic of this book. When I heard her breaking multiple countries into quadrants, I was like, okay, this is kind of starting to sound a little too generalized. But again, a lot of positive reviews on this book mentioned, I was recommended this book by an international business partner, And it makes so much sense. I've worked with people all around the world, and this makes so much sense. I guess it's accurate. I thought people would be like, this is racist or something. She's just categorizing people in different cultures and putting them in boxes. It could be that disclaimer in the beginning about how it's hard to see ourselves exactly the same way others tend to see us. And this book is an invitation to do that from a communicative, cultural standpoint. But it's probably just very accurate. This might help, but the author, by the way, she's not like, oh, well, you know us Americans, that's just how we do things. The way she says stuff like that, it's more like Americans are known by other cultures to be more subtle when giving negative feedback, by saying positive things first. But other cultures, like the Israelis, are known to be very direct. A good word to describe this, the way I see it, is it's very professional how she did it. The next chapter is called Why versus How, the Art of Persuasion in a Multicultural World. I think that much of this book is about communicating with other cultures of people. Like there's working with other cultures, persuading other cultures, leading people of other cultures. But to me, at the end of the day, they all fall under communication. All of these things that revolve around a culture in this book, they all seem to have to do with communication. As unfortunate as that might be to hear, none of these things, it really seems, are universal, which I was under the impression before checking out the book that they are. Maybe it's just body language, but even body language I've heard isn't universal from books like The Like Switch and oh my gosh, how am I forgetting this book? It's one of my favorite books about communication ever. What Everybody Is Saying. The next chapter is called How Much Respect Do You Want? Leadership, Hierarchy, and Power. She doesn't just talk about countries like America or China, by the way. She touches upon countries that are less heard of, that, you know, maybe you still know about them, like Argentina, Denmark, Amsterdam, Indonesia, countries that you don't hear about every day in many others. The next chapter is called Big D or Little D. Who decides and how? I don't know what Big D and Little D are. I think they stand for decision, but this chapter discusses where decisions are typically made in other cultures. What's interesting about this book is that you could read it or listen to the audiobook and get different ideas from corporate cultures in like Japan, while you live in America and you're like, maybe I should try this. The next chapter, The Head and the Heart, the two types of trust and how they grow. I honestly found myself at different points distracted in this book by how well she executed what it's about, laying out effective and ineffective communication between cultures of different countries can not be an easy topic to discuss in a book. So the way she approached it was very thorough, it was well-rounded. She made sure to address every talking point you could really conceive of, but she didn't do it in an overwhelming manner. The next chapter, The Needle, Not the Knife, Disagreeing Productively. Something about the culture map that I did find kind of hard to follow, however, is how she bounced from culture to culture when giving examples. If I recall correctly, she broke them up into sections, or if you will, quadrants. I don't know if it was the different scales that she laid out. I don't know what it was. This book, to be honest, might be a little too new for its own time. Like, to say that it's not futuristic, I'm not sure I could see where someone's coming from if they said that. And not literally, like, you know, what culture they're coming from. Maybe I could, but try not to rule it out. And the next chapter is How Late is Late? Scheduling and cross-cultural perceptions of time. In the end, the author said that leaders have always needed to understand human nature and principles of personality to succeed in business. What's new is the requirement for 21st century leaders to be prepared to understand a wider array of work styles than ever before because of globalization and a lot of other things. But it's not just that, it's also to be able to determine what aspects of an interaction are simply a result of personality and which ones are a result of differences in cultural perspectives. As globalization transforms the way we work, we are soon going to need the ability to decode cultural differences in order to work effectively with clients, suppliers, colleagues, you name it, from around the world. Sure, it's challenging, but you can't say it's not fascinating. Quotes. You have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 nose, and you should use them accordingly. When you know your sickness, you are halfway cured. We believe a good debate brings more ideas and information than we could ever discover without disagreement. The way we are conditioned to see the world in our own culture seems so completely obvious and commonplace that it's difficult to imagine that another culture might do things differently. Direction 1. I know that I didn't pull too much out of this book. I'm not sure exactly why, but I definitely recommend it for someone who works with people who are from different countries. Direction 2. If you like this book, you might like The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, and again, No Rules Rules by Reed Hastings and the author of this one. The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. I think my camera battery is about to die, so I'm going to try to rush through the rest of this. If there are any other books you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you checked out The Culture Map and you liked it. I'm going to drop a link below, and if you guys buy anything through the links in the description, then I get commission, which helps me build this channel and keep making these videos. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a big thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. If you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification whenever I drop new videos, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.